Guys and gals, it's Luke bringing you guys a breakdown for the 2021 Valero Texas Open. It's the week before the Masters. We're all hyped to watch golf next week, but this week we got the Valero Texas Open, which doesn't have all the biggest names in the world, but it's a great event. It's got a couple big names. We've got Spieth, we got Hideki, Corey Connors winner last year, even Scotty Scheffler coming off a little bit of a disappointing performance, but we'll have enough talent there to make it fun, and who knows, maybe some great story comes out of it. So you never really know what happens with a golf event, so I'm always looking forward to it. Just wanted to say, last week I had my wisdom teeth out, so sorry for the little bit of a lack of content there. I wasn't able to speak, wasn't really able to do much, but we're back in action for this week. And it did actually make me think that I am making and starting to incorporate a website for just my projections. It's going to be free at first, and then it's going to be a subscription based at some point. But the whole point being where I can put out some content, put out those projections for the days where I'm not able to put out content, the days I choose to take the day off from making content. So it'll be a way for people to fully, engage with my content, be able to use it for their own purposes, whether that's for their optimization, just for reference or whatnot. And it'll be out there all the time. It'll be there on the days even where you don't see a video and whatnot. So a little bit of good came out of that as well. So without further ado, let's start talking about the course for this week, which is going to be TPC San Antonio, which is an absolutely beautiful course. It's always been the host course for this event, and it's something that we have a lot of data for. Even though the data isn't necessarily very telling, we have a lot of data, which is very helpful. So just to get into some specifics here, it is a par 72 course. It's 7,400 yards, 7,435 to be exact. And it does have Bermuda grass greens, which we've seen for the last about 8 events now. It's something that PGA Tour players are very familiar with, and some players do putt on it better than others. We'll get into a couple examples here in a second, but it is something of note. And this course is designed by the great Greg Norman, the Shark. He is infamous for having pretty complex designs. He loves putting bunkers in really, really, really annoying places for the players. So it ends up being a relatively difficult design typically. Even though we did see the winner last year get to 20 under, and that was Corey Connors again, it doesn't typically get that low. Typically we see a winner around 16, 17 under, that kind of range, so I expect to see that this year. Now, getting into those key stats that I foreshadowed there a bit, number one this week is going to be total driving, and that shouldn't be surprising when you look at the fact that it's a 7,400 yard course. Yes, it's a par 72, but even for a par 72, that is exceptionally long, especially considering that we aren't at altitude. So it's almost a true 7,400 yards. We aren't necessarily at sea level or anything like that, but it is going to play long, and there's a good amount of hazards as well. So that's why it's total driving, not just driving distance that we're worried about. You have a lot of water, you have a lot of just natural areas that if you hit the ball into, a lot of times you lose your ball. So you have to be accurate off the tee, and you also do have to be long, whether that's with your irons or whether that's off the tee. So someone like Jordan Spieth, for example, he's going to be a target here in a second. He's not necessarily long off the tee. He's definitely not short, but he makes up for it with his irons. He hits exceptional long irons and whatnot. And there's a couple other players that come to mind. Ches Reavie's very similar to that. Where they're able to overcome that lack of distance off the tee. So it's going to be a short list of people that aren't long that I'm able to play this week, but they do have to have those long irons, and it makes sense when you consider just the sheer distance that the players are going to have to be dealing with this week. And something to note as well is driving accuracy is the third most correlated stat. So I mentioned before that the stats weren't necessarily that helpful this week, and that's because none of them rank inside the top 30 this week when it comes to any regression models I run. It's not very specific. We've actually seen that a couple of these last couple of weeks. A couple of these courses that, model as just hard to predict. And this week's going to be just like that. So for this week, we're going to be looking at more of our core stats, what we look for from week to week, and what's obvious just from the setup of the course. And what's obvious here is that it's a long course. There's a lot of hazards. So making sure you're staying out of those hazards and you're able to have shots into greens that are reasonable is going to be important. Number 2 this week is going to be shots gained around the green. And that's because it is the regression model's number 1 stat this week. It's the most popping stat, I'd say. It's the only one it's number 29 out of 50 on tour. That's the only one that breaks that number 30 mark. And it makes sense just considering that you're dealing with a Greg Norman design. Greg Norman, again, infamous for having complex designs. He puts bunkers in really annoying places. He puts drop-offs at really annoying places, a lot of false fronts, that kind of stuff. So having a good around the green game, being able to salvage a par when you get into the situations is absolutely key, especially considering that the winning score is going to be in the teens under par. It's not going to be something where you're, single digits under par, that kind of thing. You can afford to have some bogeys from here to there. You're going to need to rectify your score. You're only going to make so many birdies this week, and you're not going to be able to throw them away if you want any chance of winning at least this week. So shots gained around the green is going to be number 2. And not putting much onto it. It's number 1 in the regression model. Makes perfect sense from the eye test as well. And number 3 is going to be shots gained approach, which is number 2 this week, which is very atypical, believe it or not. If you know anything from my videos, it's almost always number 1, and I'll usually list it as the number 1 stat. But it being number 2 this week is very atypical and actually worthy of a downgrade for me and how I'm going to be using it this week. It's typically a key factor, but for me this week, I'm going to be looking for hot iron players coming in. This course, it has small greens. It's a course where really around the green game is so much more important because you're going to be missing the greens so often. And even when you hit the greens, a lot of times they roll off into the rough. So you're dealing with an around the green situation, statistically at least, right? Obviously, a lot of times people are putting from there, and putting stats really do matter as well. But it's a really strange situation this week. It's still going to be important because the guys that are super hot with their irons, they're going to be hitting balls to 5-10 feet, right? They're going to be stuffing it in there, getting a lot of birdie or better opportunities. So it's something that the elite iron players are going to gain from, but it's not something that I'm going to really hold against players. It's not something that I won't play a guy because he's not a super hot iron player right now. The statistics just aren't as strong for TPC San Antonio, so it's something to keep in mind. And now let's get into some of the players that I like this week. The field this week at TPC San Antonio in the Valero Texas Open isn't necessarily great, especially considering Dustin Johnson has withdrawn from the event. He was the favorite going in, which is shaking things up a bit. But we do have some highlights in the field. We have Corey Connors, who's last year's winner. We have Scotty Scheffler, Hideki Matsuyama, Jordan Spieth, and a majority of numbers 50 through 100 on the World Golf Rankings. I think pretty much every single one, to be honest with you. Which makes it a weaker than typical PGA Tour field, but better than normal from what we normally see at this event. So you're going to have some guys coming here to ramp up for the Masters next week, most notably Jordan Spieth, which I'm super excited to see how he does next week, but this week as well. And some other guys that are just playing this event and will be taking next week off because they don't qualify for the Masters. So it's going to be a good mix of guys with high motivations, guys that are a little bit looking forward to next week. So I think the winner this week is going to be someone further down the board, somebody that has that extra motivation, somebody that's not looking ahead to the Masters per se. But obviously those guys that are going to the Masters want to do well this week, right? They don't want to have an off week going into the Masters where it's the most important week in the entire year of golf. I don't think anyone thinks otherwise. I don't think anyone thinks like the Open, the U.S. Open is more important, or even the PGA Championship. So it's very important for those guys to play well this week, but I do think that extra motivation will be an X factor this week, and you'll see that with some of my picks further down the board, especially with one of the picks on my board, so it makes me cringe thinking about it. We'll get to here in a second, though, but getting into my targets for this week. My spend-up option is going to be Jordan Spieth this week. So a guy who is looking forward to next week, a guy who may have a little bit less motivation, but I don't necessarily think you need Jordan to win this week to pay off his salary. So he comes in at $10,700, who is the number 3 highest priced golfer this week, even though he's the favorite now that DJ has withdrawn. So it was kind of weird how it worked with the Vegas odds. Jordan Open does the number 4 golfer to win this golf tournament. I think it was Finau, Hideki even, and DJ obviously that were ahead of him in the gambling odds. But when DJ withdrew, they gave more than win equity to Jordan Spieth, which from a statistical perspective, you might not necessarily agree with, but when you think about it logically, it makes perfect sense. Jordan Spieth's a winner, right? And DJ's a winner as well. DJ can get super hot, go super low. Who's the hotter golfer, you'd say? It's DJ, right? DJ, when someone just gets scorching hot, it gets hotter than anyone else in the world. But now that he's gone, there's not really anyone that can do that in the field other than Jordan Spieth. So Makes perfect sense. He gobbles up a little bit more of that win equity, and I think it's important to play a lot of him this week. He statistically looked like a completely different golfer. I've said this multiple times over the last month. Than he looked completely last year, even the year before. He's gained on approach. Now this is crazy. In every round since the Genesis Invitational, that's 12 rounds. He's made the cut every single time. And he's gained on approach in every round. If I told you that 3 months ago, you'd say I'm taking mushrooms or something like that. I'm going crazy. No, he absolutely has done that. He's completely flipped the switch. The statistics show it. If you watch him live, the eye test definitely shows it. And even with his major weakness still being around, that's his driver. He hasn't even figured out the driver. It's just he flipped the switch everywhere else. He's doing great on approach. He's great around the green as he always has been. And even though he's not a positive putter this year, he's making some of those long magical putts, and they're mattering. I mean, you see him on the top of leaderboards from week to week now. And he's obviously been a little bit off on his putting because he is a negative putter this year, which to me is a little bit strange because I've followed him in the last couple weeks in live events. I've seen him on TV as well, and he's made a lot of really long putts. And to me, it doesn't even make sense that he's losing strokes putting. I think it has to be those 3 to 5 footers where he misses maybe 1 or 2 an event, and it really kills his strokes gain putting. If he cleans that up, he's going to scorch a field. He's going to win by like 5 strokes if he does that. I don't think he does that this week. I don't think he has that kind of motivation or focus. Maybe next week, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but maybe next week at the Masters, you might see a performance like that. But he's going to be underpriced. Obviously, he's the number 3 priced golfer, even though he's the number 1 win equity golfer this week. So I think he's got that going for him. He's also playing a home game. He's from Texas. He's going to have the crowd behind him. He's going to have that extra energy. So maybe if he doesn't have the motivation, the fans are going to give it to him. And all things considered, I think he's the highest owned golfer in the field, but also the one that I'll have the highest ownership of as well. I'll have double the field, whatever it is. If it's 50%, I guess I'll lock him in. He's that good this week. He's pretty much a lock, in my opinion, the top 5. So, love Jordan Spieth this week. He's my spend-up option. My second man in for this week is going to be Ryan Palmer, coming in at $9,400 this week on DraftKings. And honestly, Ryan Palmer is a high upside play for me this week. That's a little bit overpriced. But for me, I think that's a good thing. It's going to lower his ownership. It's going to make him an even more high upside play, considering I think he can take this down if he really wants to this week. He's gaining over 0.3 strokes per round off the tee and on approach this year, which is great to see. And he's historically just about as good as that, if not better in some categories from year to year. So it's not an aberration. It's something that we're used to seeing from Ryan Palmer, which is always great to see. And he doesn't always have an elite short game by any means. But he's shown a lot of promise lately. He's gained over a stroke putting, and that's like 1, sometimes it's even 2, 3 strokes in that round over his last 7 rounds, which is absolutely crazy for Ryan Palmer. Part of that is the match play, which is kind of like bootleg shots gained stats, but even in those, he's done well with the putter. And his around the green game hasn't been great of late, but historically, he is a neutral around the green player. So he's somebody that doesn't kill himself around the green typically. He's had a couple bad performances this year, specifically at the Players, where a lot of that is water volatility. So maybe that's why it's negative. So I don't expect the around the green game to hold him back as much as maybe some others may, just looking at the stats from a very top level perspective. And again, he's going to be low owned. He's blatantly overpriced in my opinion. I think he should be in the $8,000 range. He typically is. Typically, DraftKings does price him lower. So I think you get a little bit more upside because people won't be as high on him. And honestly, in a field like this, it's a weak field. You have to pay up for some people. So I'm okay doing it. He's my second man in. I think he has legit top 5 upside and could win as well. So that's my second man in. Now getting with my bread and butter play for this week, which... this is the one that was making me cringe, but this is going to be Rickie Fowler this week, coming in at $8,100. This is a high risk, high reward option. So I just want to start there and tell you it is high risk, even though it is my bread and butter play. He has not been consistent around the board at all of late. Gaining strokes off the tee, but losing a ton on approach. and vice versa. Pretty much every single round, his last like 20 rounds here, which is not a positive thing at all. But if he does find a way to combine these two assets, he's going to be a real problem. Because normally he's neutralizing his off the tee game with his approach play, or when he has those good approach rounds, he's neutralizing it off the tee. It just seems so unlucky because it's not even an aberration. He's getting multiple strokes off the tee per round sometimes, and sometimes on approach he's getting 3, even 4 strokes on approach, which is excellent. That's one of the best in the fields. When I was following him at the Honda on Thursday, he had a very mediocre round. He was doing well off the tee. He was hitting a lot of fairways, but he really wasn't taking advantage of it, which was strange. And then the next day, he wasn't doing well off the tee. He was hitting it from the adjacent fairways. He was hitting it out of hazards. He was like almost not in the water, but he was hitting it out of like the reeds at one point, but stuffing them to like 5 feet. To me, a lot of people look at it as a negative, but to me, that's a positive. He's close. If he combines these two assets, he could win this golf tournament. We'll get to why that would be important here in a second, but he has a lot of motivation this week as well. So he's consistently been one of the best around the green players in the world. And this year he's number 1 on tour in that asset, and his putting has been great this year as well. Ever since he went back to his old putter, he seems to have sparked a little bit of upwards trajectory with that club, gaining in his pretty much the last 10 events he's had. He's done a great job with the putter. He's shown plenty of promise at the Honda, like I was saying, but like I said, he seems to be getting closer, and if he's able to, just put it together for 4 days, again, that's a lot to ask for. He's going to be someone you absolutely have to have in lineups, and I think even if he doesn't, given the field strength and the fact that he is on an upward trajectory, and that's just what I can see from the eye test, he's going to get it together at some point. He's going to put together, a top 20 finish, a top 10 finish. And at $8,100, that's more than enough at his price tag. That would be a great performance for him because he puts up so many birdies as well. And here's why I really like Rickie Fowler this week, and I definitely think he's at least worth taking a stab on this week, is if he wins, he gets to play in the Masters. And Nick Faldo was giving him grief, was kind of talking about, oh, wow, he's not even in the Masters, look at that, blah, 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 blah. And, Rickie was the consummate professional. He didn't, grab the bait per se, and he kind of just said, yeah, we got to make something special happen, between now and the Masters to get in, and I'm going to do everything I can to do that. I obviously want to be at the Masters, and to me, you could kind of see with what he was saying. He's like, he has a lot of motivation to do so, and he's thinking about it. He didn't need Nick Faldo to remind him, and I think that something special could potentially happen. I think he has the most motivation of anyone in the field, in a field that doesn't necessarily have that motivation. And again, I think he's close. I think if he can just put together some rounds, right, where he's not killing himself with either off the tee or approach game, he's going to be someone to contend because he models well for this course. He really does. And he's not one of the shorter hitters. Even, I think he's about a 310-yard average drive, and that should be above average in this field. So I give him a little bit of credit there, and he's someone I'm taking a stab on. It's a little bit of a gamble, obviously, but it could definitely pay off in a big way. My value play for this week is going to be Byeong-Hun, coming in at $7,500. And he's an absolute stud when it comes to around the green play. He's gaining over half a stroke per round this year around the green, which is one of the best in the entire world, obviously. And aside from the players, he's gained in his last 10 rounds on approach. And I say aside from the players because Byeong-Hun was a victim of number 17 on the players, let's say. He had, I think, 4 or 5 balls in the water in 17, which completely skewed your approach stats, everything like that. So I'm essentially ignoring the players for him because I watched him at the players and he was hitting the ball just fine. He hits the ball very straight. He typically doesn't get himself into trouble. And he again fell victim to number 17. It gets some people every year, and again, I'm not holding that against him. He's never been a great putter. That's the number one weakness of Byeong-Hun. I think everyone knows that. He's a self-proclaimed terrible putter. It's all right because this week putting is minimized. The importance there. It doesn't show up in the key stat model. It's the least correlated stat, and I expect that to play into his favor a bit. I love playing Byeong-Hun when it's week like this with putting not being important. But people are definitely going to shy away from him as well, considering that he missed the cut of the players and it looks so ugly. And it really only looks that ugly, I'm telling you, because of number 17. He hit 5 balls in the water. That's a 10 shots gained difference. He literally, and I actually went through the numbers to figure this out. He was significantly positive ball striking at the players if you get rid of number 17, just one hole. And people are going to hold that against him. His price is going to go down. He's going to be low owned. Literally for that alone, he's my value play this week. It's using statistics to your advantage, right? They look terrible, even though that's just not reality. I'm not saying I think he's going to go out, win the golf tournament this week. He models very well. I think he's very, very safe to make the cut. And again, he does have upside to top 10 or top 5. Just because he models well, he is one of the better ball strikers in the field. And every once in a long while, Benny Ann gets a hot putter. It does not happen very often, but when it does, he almost wins golf tournaments. So I like him as a value play. I think he will help you score well this week. And now time for my diamond in the rough, which is going to be Charles Schwartzel, coming in at $6,700. Now, Charles is a household name. Pretty much everyone knows him that watches golf. And he's historically been one of the better around the green players on tour over his career. He's from South Africa. The South Africans tend to be very good around the green players. And he's gotten much better with his putter of late. Early on in his career, he wasn't the best putter. But over his career, he's essentially gotten better every single year. He's now gaining over his last 2 years on tour pretty significantly as well as one of the better putters on tour. And believe it or not, though, his iron play has regressed. His ball striking in general has regressed over the last few years. So as his putting has gone better, his iron play has gone worse, which is not the greatest thing to see. Obviously, he's in a little bit of a downturn in his career. He's getting older. It's just only natural for people at that age. But believe it or not, he's had some great rounds this year. From time to time, he gains over 3 or 4 strokes on approach. He has a lot of rounds, about 40-50% of his rounds where he's a neutral off the tee player. And I think that's the recipe for him this week. He goes out, hits a lot of fairways. He's not going to gain a lot because he's not as long off the tee as he used to be. He, keeps himself out of trouble. Has a couple decent iron rounds, maybe on 1 or 2 rounds. He's shown plenty of them. At about 20% of his rounds, he's doing it right now. He's going to be a force this week. He's coming in at that low price tag of $6,700, which is great as well. And again, he's a high risk, high reward play, but that's what you're getting further down the board. I don't think he's somebody who's going to be a staple in your lineups by any means, but he's somebody that you can plug in when you need to save that salary, and he still has that upside. He still has that juice to get up into a top 5, a top 10 if he has that good week. So I like him as a shot in the dark this week. He's my diamond in the rough. And that's going to be it for this week, guys. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like what you saw, feel free to drop a like. It really helps me out. And obviously subscribe if you want to see more videos when they come out. I'll be putting out NBA videos every day now that my mouth's feeling better. The golf video every week. And again, I'll be incorporating that new website that I talked about before. Where I'll have projections up. It'll be up on a daily basis. Specifically for the NBA, right? It'll be up every single day. It'll change with injury news and whatnot. I'm thinking it'll start as a free service and then quickly transition into a paid service after I get the hang of it, after I feel like the quality is where it should be. So look forward to that. And again, thanks for watching, and good luck this week.